Welcome to the Back Page, episode 3. Today is September 13th, 2023. I'm Carter Sims.
And I'm Collin Crisp, and this episode of the Back Page, we'll be talking Hayes Sports, college football's Week 2 statement wins, and a rundown of the first week of the NFL season. Here at Hayes this week, volleyball lost to Scioto, boys soccer lost 4-1 to Kilbourne yesterday, and Chasakala scored the only point, and girls soccer had a road shutout of Kilbourne 3-0. Last weekend, our football team got what is arguably our biggest win of the season against a team that usually is not as close a game we had, but it ended up being a thriller this time. We beat Big Walnut 38-31 to stay undefeated through the first month.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a very, very long time since Delaware's beaten Big Walnut in a football game, so obviously, like, a huge deal whenever something happens after such a long distance in between the two, but I think what you're starting to realize about this year's football season, which I really like, is if you've been to any of the games in the past, typically the biggest game of the year is just Buckeye Valley, and it'll be sold out, and there'll be people everywhere, and then it just kind of drops off after that in terms of just like excitement around the program, and just like the general like following of the team sometimes. But I think this year has been different, where I would say last Friday was probably one of the best environments we've had all year. So I'm excited to see like if the momentum that the team has built can keep continuing into the season and still have like support and decent crowds and environments for the rest of the way through.
Very much. I don't have much to compare it to when it comes to past Hayes events. I wasn't here yet, but I know that for this year it's been really a remarkable environment to be in, whether it be up in the stands or down on the field. Just looking around at like the sounds of the stadium, it's really, really unique for a high school atmosphere. And the team's playing really good. We haven't played a game where like we played sloppy and got away with it. It's been really clean football, and it's been a joy to watch.
Yeah, I think it helps when every side of every phase of the ball has been very effective so far. I mean, obviously the offense putting up a lot of points. Austin Caza scored the first touchdown in the game and then got another one later. But the defense forced 2 fumbles in the fourth quarter, and special teams hasn't missed a kick all year. Like, just when you have dependability throughout the whole team, and you see guys, especially like younger guys, getting in for the first time, like we saw a couple of weeks ago, and like getting that first experience, like that's a really good thing to see. Just kind of speaks to the strength of the program, I think, when you have the trust and kind of just faith in younger guys to be able to put them in big time situations and have them come through.
100%. It shows that, in theory, the future of the program is just as bright as it is now. And when it comes to the all faces of the ball thing, I think that's what gives me the most hope for how this year's going to end up playing out.
Yeah.
Because even if one phase of the ball has an off night, like we can say, hey, most likely it won't be all 3 of them.
I think a win against a team like Big Walnut, where they have guys that are known throughout the region, and Stover and Severs, like stuff like that, I think it kind of helps kind of defeat this idea that Delaware is just like the little brother of the OCC sometimes. Like, I think there's this negative connotation about Hayes teams that, oh, you're good, but you're never going to be, better than a Big Walnut or this Westerville or this Hilliard or something. I think, like, whenever we have wins like that, like, I think that just shows, like, kind of how special some of these programs that we have at school are, and just the level that we're at right now in terms of football. Because I think when you look up and down the conference, like, there's going to be tough games for us this season. Like, there's not an easy game on the rest of the schedule.
Yeah.
But I think you have a lot of trust in this team, seeing them have their back against the wall against Big Walnut and still, claw and find a way to win.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. And when it comes to looking ahead, we have our first road game this week.
Yep.
It's pretty wild to think about, considering we're over a month into the season.
Whenever you go on the road, there's obviously a difference in just like your routine and just little details of the game day experience. But I'm looking forward to this game. I'm hoping it's like another step for this team. But I think there's a lot to be excited right now if you're a Hayes football fan. Just we're about to talk about statement wins in college football in a minute. Like I think that's a statement win. Like
Yeah, I was about to say that 100%.
Non-conference is always kind of funny because you never really know what you're going to get, right? But when you have a big win against like a huge conference opponent like that has a reputation in the region, like that's where people start talking. I think if you've been on the internet or social media in the past week or so, like you start to see that about Hayes a little bit in football. But we're about to transition to college football statement wins. But as far as high school statement wins go, I think that's about as much as you can ask for right now in this point in the season.
100%. Because we're rolling into Westerville North next week, and if we go in there 3-1, just losing to Big Nut like usual, then like that's a game that Westerville North looks at that, and you talked about the little brother mentality that Hayes gets, and like that's a game that they see as they just mark down like as a Bama Vanderbilt. But now after that, like they see that we're really rolling, we're a team to like be messed with. Like that's how you build a reputation going forward down the line, get into a team's head. But yeah, speaking statement wins, going into college football week 2 statement wins. I think that no other team out of all of week 2 had a bigger statement win than Texas. A lot of people have, that we hear this a lot and it ends up not really being the case, the whole Texas is back thing.
Yeah.
And I'm not ready to say that, but if there was a reason to over the last decade, I think this is the most valid take to have it on. Like, what a win that was for Texas.
Yeah, I think just seeing these Ohio State transfer quarterbacks just beat Alabama is such a mixed feeling I have sometimes. Like,
Totally.
First Joe Burrow and now Quinn Ewers. Like, I think you talked about the Texas is back thing, and obviously Sam Ehlinger kind of got clowned for that a year later after saying that in the bowl game and not having a very good season after. But I think the conference was dominated by Oklahoma for so long, and there's always a changing of a guard in college football of who's going to kind of be the next team to represent that conference. And I'm not saying that Texas is back either, but when you look at that game, like I've never seen Alabama look so bad before, if that makes sense. Like I felt like they just put so much pressure on the Tide, and even the quarterback situation we talked about for Ohio State a couple of weeks ago about not really being sure, but Alabama was in a very similar situation not too long ago in the offseason.
Oh yeah, I think they still are based off what happened to that game. Jalen Milroe, that was not the best primetime debut. Now Texas is a hard team to debut primetime against, but that could have been better. But we said that about quite a few quarterbacks to start the year this year. So whether they stick with him and develop him, and he ends up being great, or no matter what happens. Right now, I think that Alabama, if you take the quarterback off the team, they're one of the best teams in America right now. They just have to really develop that position. They're in a very Ohio State-esque position.
I think Alabama right now is kind of a similar situation as the San Francisco 49ers, if that makes sense. Pound for pound, probably one of the most acclaimed rosters in the country. But maybe the most important position in college football is one that you have questions about right now.
That's a great comparison. I think that's exactly where they're at.
But yeah, you put this in the notes, Texas doesn't have anyone as good as Alabama the rest of the schedule. So your logic should tell you, oh yeah, they should win out the rest of their games to be the representative in the college football playoff. But that's never how it works. Right?
Oh no.
So we'll have to see. I think Ewers is a guy that, me personally, I was oh yeah, just another high prospect quarterback that never really pans out one of the top programs. But I was completely wrong with that, especially considering his fourth quarter performance.
He was so good. I put his stat line here just so we can admire it for a moment. In his game against Alabama, which is a very stingy defense, I know that they had the really big Fitzpatrick days of everybody just being so ecstatic about how it's the most perfect defense we've ever had, but they're not there, but they're still really good. We have this thing where we compare Alabama teams to past Alabama teams instead of everybody else in the field this year, and they may not have the defense they used to, but they're still one of the best defenses in the country. And Quinn Ewers made it look not that way. With 349 passing yards and 3 touchdowns and 0 interceptions, he just decimated that team. And As you referred to the rest of the schedule, I mean, they got Oklahoma, Red River rivalry. Anything could happen, right? And then Kansas State being the Big 12 champion, and TCU being last year's playoff contender. That being the only true road game of those three.
Yeah.
There are losable games in that schedule. That's not an easy schedule, but when you look at it, they shouldn't play any other teams that are big playoff contenders, unless you count Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Out of those three games, where do you think they're most likely trip up?
I think TCU could be dangerous just because I think there's a lot of negative connotation around TCU after kind of being Colorado's first opponent in what looks like a pretty explosive Colorado team we're going to get to for a second. Mm-hmm. I think that could be a game. And obviously they're not the team they were, last season that made the national championship. But, you get up for Oklahoma. That's just not, especially for Texas, that is the game. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I could see TCU kind of being that, not a trap game, but maybe a slip-up game.
Yeah, I agree with you there. TCU has a really I think that after the Colorado loss, they just everyone just gave up.
Yeah.
But Colorado is a really, really good team. If you watch their game against Nebraska this week, they really, really showed off again. I was talking to a few friends of mine that aren't on this podcast, and I was talking to them about how I'm not sure Colorado's going to be able to keep that up every week.
No, I agree, but I think they're a team that's going to be able to find a way to win games.
Yes.
If that makes sense. There's not going to always just be the, Madden 19 performance of just slinging for 500 yards and having your player play both sides of the ball and have his way all the time. That's never just going to be a perfect situation all the time. But you saw them look rough in the first half and be able to make adjustments and come out on top in the second.
And that's huge to me. That is massive. Because we saw them get a game that looked like it was going to be really close and just take it over. And that's something that I think a lot of the best teams, whether it be rebuilding and becoming great or already great, that's something that all those teams have, is the ability to just calm the storm, breathe in, breathe out, be a part of the mechanism, and then just take over when they have to.
Yeah. And Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter have been getting a lot of the attention so far, and rightfully so. But I think Xavier Weaver is one of the one of the most interesting players in college football right now, because he's not going to get the shine that Travis Hunter is going to get just because of how dynamic of a player Travis Hunter is. But he had a very impressive performance inside it as well.
Mm-hmm. He had a very Marvin Harrison-esque performance with multiple highlight catches, 10 receptions, 170 yards. He got his touchdown. It was. When it came to how good Sanders, the quarterback, was, he was the mechanism that what made the offense work. If you take him out of the game, I'm not sure Sanders puts up all those numbers. He was just a matchup nightmare.
Yeah, he's kind of the straw that stirs the drink for them right now. I think it's obviously very early in the Deion Sanders era right now, right? Mm-hmm. And there's always going to be bumps in the road, and we've seen this before in college football, where there's kind of this honeymoon phase of new coach coming in and exciting wins and starting to change things in the program, but how does it translate? And one thing I was thinking about that I kind of disagree with Deion Sanders right now about is he's saying that culture doesn't really matter on your team as long as you're talented winning games, but I do think that's kind of false, because they do have a culture that's been set. Whether that's something that's been actively voiced or not on the team. I think this team has a very clear culture of if you play good, they pay good, and they're willing to put guys in situations that are going to benefit them the most. So there's this culture of just kind of Patriots, do your job. And you'll have the freedom to be yourself.
I find it really ironic that Deion Sanders went into a program in one off season. In my mind, gave it one of the funnest cultures in college football right now, and then says that culture is not a big facet of what makes a team great.
Yeah.
Between the whole leader and dog thing he pointed out last week, and Travis Hunter playing both sides of the ball, the electricness of the offense, there's a lot of things that give that team an identity. It has a very distinct identity. If you put them in a different uniform set and it's who's that, you'd probably be able to tell after a few drives.
Yeah.
It's a very unique team. I think that we know who they are. There are a lot of teams where down the line of the season, one of our biggest criticisms of them is who is that team. We've had that with past LSU teams lately, post Joe Burrow. Like, what is that team supposed to be? Colorado doesn't have that problem, and it's week 2. It's really wild. In a battle of 2 head coaches that really needed a win, we had Texas A&M and Miami this week. In Jimbo Fisher's case, Texas A&M's head coach, last year, as has gotten a lot of publicity, he kind of underperformed. Started the year top 10 and then ended up not making a bowl game. It was a really catastrophic season for Jimbo Fisher, mostly led by his lack of an offense. Miami was in a very similar situation, except the expectations were not maybe that high. But Mario Cristobal is still a very well-known head coach from Oregon and had an $80 million contract. He had high expectations too, and they both just kind of flopped. So I was really looking forward to this A&M Miami game to see if either of them could make a statement win out of it. Can one of them give their program some momentum and show that they have an offense again that can lead them to winning big games? Mario Cristobal ended up being the one who showed off, winning a 48-33 just thriller of a game. It was so fun. Tyler Van Dyke, before last year started, was a second-round projected quarterback, but then he came back for another year. And honestly, Mario Cristobal's really rough offense he coordinated last year probably made him not want to come back. But he needed to now because he was more of a hot topic on the NFL charts. But he had what is arguably the best game of his career. 5 touchdowns, 374 yards, and completed nearly 70% of his passes against an A&M defense that had the best pass defense in the league last year. I think indisputably, rather A&M scoring 33 points, that could either be put up there to their offense being better or Miami's defense still needing work. But Miami's offense is back. How high do you think this takes them?
I mean, I think I was going to ask you the same thing. The ACC is kind of just like the Wild West right now, right?
Yes.
It's the wild East Coast right now. We saw Clemson look terrible. We've seen Florida State have a really good game against LSU. And we have these, general impressions of these teams. But I think what you need so much of in college football is just, the ability to, handle the best and still find a way to win. We kind of talked about that with Colorado. I don't know that Miami is going to be a major player in the ACC just yet, but I definitely see them as being at least top 4 in this conference and going into kind of the last couple weeks of the season, being an interesting team for the conference championship.
And originally, I think it was last episode, we were talking about how besides Clemson, Florida State doesn't have a very juiced schedule. Now they have somebody.
Yeah.
If Miami's offense is legitimately that good, we saw their defense get better throughout the year last year, but their offense just never did. If their offense can keep it up, then that's a team. That's a team that can beat Florida State.
Yeah.
And that's something the ACC needs right now after Clemson's loss. As you mentioned, the ACC being a Wild West, last year North Carolina State was much better than expectation. I was really curious to see if they'd return to being a top 25 team this year. But against Notre Dame, I'm not sure it's the best measuring stick, as they looked really good this year. Marcus Freeman in his first year last year had a rough start, but he ended up having a really good finish, and he's carried that momentum over. At the end of the third quarter, this looked like it was still a game. It was 24-17. North Carolina State had the ball. It could have been anything. Notre Dame ended up winning that thing, 45-24. I went back and watched the replay on the whole game the next day. We got to play this team in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And that looks really good.
I kind of like this Notre Dame team. I mean, obviously their quarterback's 29 years old. But they have a very balanced offense, right? I think that they're very dynamic and have a lot of options on offense, which isn't always, appreciated in college football sometimes because we see these, flashy players, whether that's, a running back who's, going to put up 200 yards on the team and you can trust in, the middle of the field and outside the 20s, or that's, a dual threat quarterback that we see so often. But I think that this Notre Dame team just has dependability and a lot of options offensively. And I mean, it's whenever you put up 45 points, it's a good day, right? In college, that's a pretty standard amount to be happy about. But when you talk about Ohio State playing in 2 weeks, I think kind of all bets are going to be off in that game. Like that, this could be a game that's either 54-60 at the end of it, or a 13-17 like smash mouth, shutout, like shutout for 2 quarters type of game type thing.
I agree with you because I don't think we really know how good Ohio State's defense is yet. I was referring to Marcus Freeman's like major step up at the end of last year into this year. Jim Knowles, defensive coordinator at Ohio State, we could see a very similar thing with him. He had a really good beginning to last year. He had a couple trip ups towards the end, but against really high caliber opponents. But like he has a great reputation as a defensive coordinator, and he showed some really good proof week 1. If he ends up like really showing off against Notre Dame, we could have like the best defense we've had in a few years.
Yeah, and I think Notre Dame is going to be a very good measuring stick for this Ohio State team going in because the Big Ten this year is a little murky. I think.
I agree.
Like Michigan right now, probably the best team in the conference just based off of performance in the first 2 weeks, which doesn't always mean a lot, but that's just like where we sit right now, right?
Yeah.
And then I think Penn State's really good too. There's a lot of in between space, but like what does a first year Luke Fickell Wisconsin team look like? Like there's a lot to be kind of unsure about.
Yeah, I mean Washington State ended up beating them too. So.
Yeah, but my point is like they could be a team that maybe puts it together and has a big win at the end of the season. Like we see that sometimes in college football, but
yeah,
like there's a lot to be unsure about. But I think right now you have Michigan and Ohio State, and Penn State is not far off from that range right now.
Mm-hmm.
And if Ohio State can put together just a competent offensive performance like we saw, not against Indiana, but a little more against Youngstown State, but against a top team. And the Notre Dame game last year wasn't an exciting game for a neutral, right? Like that was kind of like a drag out like game of endurance type thing.
Totally.
If Ohio State can show like the offense that we kind of saw against Youngstown State, which is Youngstown State, so you can take it as you will, but against Notre Dame, considering that like how improved their defense is and like how much pressure they're going to have, considering that their offense can just stay on the field, like that could be something I think gives you more trust as an Ohio State fan. Say like, okay, Michigan and Ohio State probably back on the same level again this year.
And this may be the first and last time I ever say this, but I think the Western Kentucky game this week is going to be very telling. Because, like, Western Kentucky, while Group of 5 team, is one of the better ones.
Yeah. And
if we can go in there and against a Western Kentucky team that makes a lot of other Group of 5 teams look really silly and score, like, 40-something on them, that's a really big thing going into the Notre Dame game. Or we could have the alternative happen, look like the Indiana game again, and then it's like more of a like, going into the Notre Dame game. I think for a game against the Hilltoppers, it may be one of the more important instances of Group 5 game we have.
I think little by little you're starting to have more opportunities to kind of see what this Ohio State team is. Like, pretty confident that Cobb is the guy going forward, right? Like, that's not really
Ryan Day said it in an interview.
And whether you think that's the best option or not, like I'm pretty sure that most Ohio State fans would agree that they don't really see him, getting moved to the bench just to see what other options we have, right? Like he's going to be the guy going forward for better or for worse. So I think like as we get along, as we progress, we're starting to figure out more about this Ohio State team, and I think whenever you can have a ranked team that's a historic, I wouldn't say rival, but historic opponent, and you're going into like that building, like that's going to be a game like that just feels like college football. You're going to start to like, okay, this is what I can expect from this Ohio State team.
And South Bend's hard to play at. I mean, we've watched Georgia go in there in previous years and like be given fits. It's a tough place to play. And with the whole Colin McCord thing, I think that we've seen this before. It's just a matter if it pays off this time like it did last time. Because we've seen this with Haskins, where we had a younger, more versatile person on our bench, but then we had the specialist in throwing the ball. Dwayne Haskins ended up being named starter, and the entire fan base was like torn on it. And then he ended up being great by the end of it. He like made a big turnaround throughout the season. I'm hoping we'll see the same thing with McCord. And like considering Ryan Day is still Ryan Day, I think we will. I don't have reason to think he won't.
Yeah, I think no Ohio State fan right now is worried about it getting worse offensively.
Mm-hmm.
They're just worried about it not getting better. Like
Yeah,
the current state of Ohio State football in the grand scheme of things, not something to be extremely disappointed about. But I think there's this expectation that as Buckeye teams progress, like into October, into November, like we start to see the best football being played.
totally. On the topic of questionable Ohio State quarterback performances, Joe Burrow in the NFL had probably his roughest outing so far in the league. It was against the Browns, who won 24-3 in a Week 1 blowout. What was your biggest takeaways from the performance?
I've seen varying opinions on this game from a lot of other Bengals fans, and I kind of sit at a spot where if Joe Burrow has his worst performance of his NFL career so far on a rainy day in Week 1 where he had no training camp due to an injury, it's just coming off a contract negotiation, like, we can live. Like, there's no panic button being pressed for me right now. I've never seen Joe look so uncomfortable before, but I do think this is kind of the basement, right? Like, you can only go up from here. And I still think that when you look at this Bengals team, that this is, like I said in one of my stories earlier last week, like, this might be the greatest Bengals roster of all time. Like, there's a lot of, trust in this team right now.
Yeah.
And when you look at that defense, like, they still held the Browns to only 24 points.
Yeah.
Having to be on the field for what felt like the entire game. And obviously the weather plays a part in how offenses play, like whether you spread it out or whether you try to pack it in and run the ball. And Bengals in the Joe Burrow era definitely like to spread it out and kind of just let it fly. Like they have probably the best receiving core in the league, so unless your guys go make a play, and that's always hard in sloppy conditions. But if you're going to take anything away from that game, I think it's if that's as bad as it gets, we can live, and you have a lot of trust in this defense going forward.
Yeah, from a Bengals perspective, I think that's the exact takeaway to have. From a Browns perspective, you should be really happy with this performance.
I think if you're a Browns fan, that sucks, but like you're cautiously optimistic, right? And that's that's been used so many times in Cleveland in the past few years. But you saw Deshaun Watson kind of have that athleticism again, and kind of that obviously not up to full form. And dude hasn't played full season of football or even full 10 weeks of football in a very long time.
Yeah,
but like you kind of saw the shades of the quarterback that was in Houston, right? Like what did you think, just as a person who didn't have a team in the game watching that game?
Well, my first takeaway was not of the quarterbacks, but the Browns running back performance was ridiculous. When you have over 200 yards in the ground any given Sunday, yeah, that's major. But quarterback wise, I don't think Week 1's a good barometer ever. I think that Watson outperforming Burrow, while I think I could have went there and outperformed Burrow this week, it gives hope. Because I wasn't sure if we'd ever see Deshaun Watson be Deshaun Watson again, like the one we saw make the playoffs in Houston.
Yeah.
I didn't sure we'd ever see that. And we saw glimpses. We didn't see him.
Right.
We did see flashes of Watson.
We saw shades, right? Like we saw hints of it. And when when he scores the touchdown, does a guitar celebration. Like you have kind of flashbacks of the Houston era, and obviously still through interception. That offense had 2 turnovers that day as well, but
yeah,
I was very impressed by the Browns' defense and ability to get pressure on Burrow early. Literally first play of the game, dude's on the ground.
Mm-hmm. I think that's the biggest takeaway for me is the Browns' defense has a stacked roster year in and year out, and then they end up being good, which good's never bad. But if you have one of the best defensive rosters in the league, you should be better than good.
And I think. A lot of we talk about having a stacked roster and having this defense just full of stars, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then when you look at the other side of the ball, Baker Mayfield's quarterback, you're like, that gives you pause over your expectations of a Browns team, right? Like, Baker Mayfield was in his Browns tenure, like obviously a average to pretty good quarterback in the NFL, but I don't think he was ever in the ranks of like top 3, top 5 quarterbacks in the league. But you look at the AFC, you're going a while in top quarterbacks until you get to an NFC quarterback. Like the AFC is so stacked, and so I think Deshaun Watson's going to have a huge role in this Brown team of kind of opening up their offense if he can kind of get to that. Be able to survey the field a little bit, and then a quick scramble. Not like, Lamar Jackson gets a lot of credit for being one of the best scramblers in the NFL, but I would say Deshaun Watson's a very more like situational scrambler sometimes. If he can kind of get to that spot at least of, bringing a lot of flexibility to that offense, and then you have Nick Chubb, who's one of the most dependable, just one of the best people at doing their job in the league right now.
Yeah.
And a defense, and like I don't think the Browns defense is going to sustain that level of pressure on every team. We're still unsure about this Bengals offensive line. There's a lot of trust in it, basically just kind of based off of paychecks. Totally. And you could say the same thing about Deshaun Watson. I mean, this is the guy that, arguably was kind of overpaid for in his acquisition to the team, so there's high expectations based off of that. Mm-hmm. But if you can just kind of see them as the Browns, get a little more flexibility on offense, a lot of pieces they've had for a long time there, like Donovan Peoples-Jones, obviously had a good game on Sunday. Mm-hmm. Nick Chubb, obviously, like I said, one of the best people at just doing their job in the league. I don't think they're necessarily going to be a contender because the AFC North itself is so stacked, but could have a little bit higher level of maybe in the conversation of a wild card playoff spot.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. You mentioned the stackness of the AFC quarterback room, and it was really weird week 1 because I don't think any of them really showed off, and that included Mahomes.
Yeah. I mean, the Chiefs, this is just, to be honest, I think this is just the annual Chiefs, September, days, wake me up when it ends, but they looked rough. Kansas City did it on Thursday night, but like you said, week 1's never the end-all be-all of what your team's going to be that year, and then you factor in, obviously, Travis Kelce was missing, and I don't think that should just be discredited. Like some analysts said that, it doesn't count because they didn't have Travis Kelce. Mm-hmm. And then, obviously, Chris Jones was on the other side, and he should be back now after kind of, sorting out that contract situation. And we're not really sure about this Lions team. I think there's, varying levels of expectation in this Lions team either.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't think I've ever seen a team get so much hype on opening night after a ring ceremony and then come out so flat.
Well, I don't think it's as much Mahomes' fault as he's gotten. There were so many drops.
Yeah.
Many.
Kadarius Toney's going to get a lot of heat for that. And,
yeah.
We'll see about kind of what an expanded role in this offense looks like for him. Mm-hmm. But, as a quarterback, you can't really, catch the ball for the receiver.
Exactly.
Sometimes, right?
And on top of that, we have to make observations, not draw conclusions, like you were saying with the Bengals in last game review. I don't think that if Kelsey's on the field, that gives him his safety blanket, and he doesn't have that.
Right.
He has a lot of drops. It was just a real sloppy game from both sides. It was a very bounce of ball-esque game. I would pay you a lot of money to bet that in a month and a half, we don't see another game like that out of Mahomes.
Oh, I mean,
the Chiefs won't look the same.
Like I said, I think it's just kind of the annual Chiefs slumber through September. Saw it last year, saw it the year before that, and it takes time when, especially the Chiefs have quietly had a revolving door at receiver in the past few years. Obviously, Tyreek Hill was, their poster guy at that position for a long time, but wide receiver 2, 3, and the running back position, that's kind of been shifting in the balance sometimes for them. Mm-hmm. I think it takes a while to kind of get that integrated into your offense and not necessarily get to know each other, but get comfortable and looking like the Chiefs teams that we've seen in December and January.
I agree with you. That's a take that not a lot of people are talking about, but more people should be. something everybody's talking about is the Aaron Rodgers situation. If you didn't see it, then let us inform you that Monday night, about like three snaps into four snaps into his Jets career, he was injured and he's going to be out for the season. How much do you think this holds the Jets back from what they could have been?
A lot. I mean, I don't think Aaron Rodgers is. To be honest, I don't view Aaron Rodgers as highly as some other people are. I don't think he's had the greatest year last year, obviously in Green Bay, but that situation was kind of rotting at his core for a long time. So you don't want to judge too much off of one season, but I don't think that he's going to be. Well, obviously not now, but I didn't think that he was going to be, just the savior to that Jets franchise just immediately, right? Like I think that's going to be something that takes time. But I don't know. I think the real question that you should be asking, like, not how much does Aaron Rodgers hold him back, how much does Zach Wilson hold him back?
Yeah. He didn't do terrible for playing the Bills.
Yeah.
But we've seen this before with Zach Wilson, where like throughout the season we just get more and more sure that he just isn't the guy.
Yeah, he just doesn't look like a franchise quarterback in the NFL. The more you look at him, right? I mean, there was questions about him from draft day coming out of BYU whether he was going to be, just another Jets, rotation quarterback, like just a couple years in, then he's out, on to the next one, like we've seen so many times before. And I think whenever you trade for a guy in a position who gets hurt and you still have the person that you were trying to replace come back, that's a troubling situation to be in this franchise. I mean, it was kind of a net gain of 0.
Yeah, I would absolutely despise being a Jets fan right about now after that. He wasn't the only quarterback on the field that didn't have the greatest night, though. Josh Allen looked very much not like himself.
Yeah, Josh Allen, Rodgers was out for the night, but Josh Allen played like it. I mean, he blamed the loss on himself, and I don't think you can ever blame a loss just on one person, because if you can't blame a win on one person, you can't blame a loss on one person. But I mean, this was a guy who just we've seen it with Josh Allen, right? Like we've seen how dynamic he can be. He's huge, it's hard to take down in the pocket, very mobile, great arm talent. But then you also see kind of the nasty side flare up of just like the turnovers and just out of sync. And then you talk about Stephon Diggs, who looks like he's had a foot out of the door in Buffalo for a while now. I'm a little. I mean, I'm not concerned. I don't like the Bills, but I'm a little concerned just as a neutral about this Bills team.
Yeah, we talked about this last week. As this was your team that you think had high hopes that maybe shouldn't, and with the Josh Allen thing, this was his critique out of college. Like, we've seen this coming for a while. And where his highs have been so frequent now to where like we were just like, oh, people were wrong.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's the case at this point. I just think that we've had a lot of, surge around him. But Allen has his turnover issues, and we saw them at their most disastrous this last Monday. And I don't think that the Bills are going to be continuously that much of a disaster, but I don't think that we can reliably say they won't be that way again. Like, at some point, I think that this is the offense we'll see. This won't be the only time we see them like this.
Yes. I mean, like you kind of said about the Chiefs, where, we think it's just going to kind of go up from here. You just have to, kind of steady the boat a little bit and ride out the waves. Like, there's going to be waves all the way through for this Bills team, especially when we look at this division. I mean, no quarterback really had a great week one, except for one of the quarterbacks in their division this week. Like, Tua and Tyreek Hill looked like a great connection. The Dolphins looked like they were firing on all cylinders on Sunday. Jets kind of a wild card now with Aaron Rodgers out, but even the Patriots, like, improved defense, I would think. And just in my opinion, Mac Jones probably not the guy, but I still think that the Patriots can be a team that's kind of a villain for some teams, where they might provide them a loss in a crucial playoff week, a week leading up to the playoffs, where you really do not want to lose to a division opponent.
Yeah,
I could see the Patriots being one of the best, 7-win teams we've seen in a long time.
Yeah, I agree with you there, because that's the thing with the Patriots now. Is like, no matter how much their offense holds them back, they have a great defense, and in a division that is made up of teams that are primarily offense driven. Like,
Yeah.
they can pull a lot of upsets.
And I would say you trust the Bills to get maybe at least to the playoffs this year.
Mhm.
But you look at this division, like division crown is not totally for certain for them, and home field advantage is not even really just a by God conclusion. Just like I would say, probably like Chiefs, like you're a team confident you're going to see them play at Arrowhead come playoff time, right? Like I don't think you have the same expectation of the Bills right now.
I agree. If you're a Bills fan, you look at this team and you're not as just for sure about it as maybe even as Cincinnati.
Yeah.
They had an awful week one, and you still look at that team and you're like, oh well, you'll see them at least play one game at home when playoffs roll around. I don't think we have that with Buffalo, which is weird for them because we have had that the last couple of years.
Yeah.
And something else that I don't think is discussed enough about Allen is we talk about his playoff woes, but I don't think it's solely playoffs. I think it's like clutch time.
Yeah.
He has clutch time issues, rather it be his 0-5 overtime record or just like down the stretch he throws controversial passes that cause turnovers, which you just can't win fourth quarters that way. He's not the Mahomes that you just see come alive in the fourth quarter.
And if there's anything to take away, I think, from this week, it's week one is not everything, right?
Yeah.
I think like I said earlier, I think there's a lot of teams, more so than before in the NFL, that really believe they can win the Super Bowl this year.
Yes.
I think when you look at like going into week two, there's a lot of teams that believe they played about as bad as they could week one and are just on the way up.
Yeah. And if we look back over the week one we just had, if we really are going to sit here and say that Tua, Brock Purdy, and Trevor Lawrence are going to be like our three best quarterbacks from throughout the season, it'd be an awful take.
Right.
We saw the majority of the quarterbacks who did good do it because they had a skill position player go off and they just fed them the ball, like Tua did to Tyreek Hill or Trevor Lawrence did to Calvin Ridley. Like, I don't think that we can sit here and like say that this, and this is for sure the case.
Yeah.
But we can make observations.
I think you kind of know that San Francisco, maybe have the best roster in the NFL right now, right?
Yeah.
Other than like I said earlier, other than quarterback, and they played a Steelers team that I don't think is as good as other people think it is. I think they're kind of just like a trendy pick to ride right now.
Yeah.
I don't think Kenny Pickett's even like a top 50% quarterback in this league right now,
Mm-hmm.
but. Regardless, like good defenses are going to shine in those situations, and I think we saw that. We saw that with San Francisco, and we saw that with Dallas so far.
Yes.
And I think like if there's anything that you should be able to like say transitions in the week two after week one, that's defense.
Yeah, I think that and run game. Like, for instance, I don't think that the Cleveland Browns like rushing attack is going to die any going into the next couple of games. That's like one of the reasons that we talk about when you're on the road. Rushing attack really helps you because passing the ball can be inconsistent, rather it be week to week or home to road. But running the ball is usually a pretty consistent option if you have it. And Nick Chubb is just an option, like you said earlier, is the best at doing his job. I don't think that they can lose that. McCaffrey had a really good rushing game for the 49ers this week. I think that that's not something they'll lose. So, like, on the rushing side of things, I think that you can look at week one and maybe not draw conclusions, but draw, like, really surefire observations. While quarterback-wise, like, you got to pump the brakes.
Next week we'll be back to draw surefire conclusions and tell every NFL fan base exactly what's going to happen to their team this year. This has been episode 3 of the Back Page. You can follow us on Spotify and YouTube.